My name is Shelby, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be back living with my parents in our small Colorado town after my divorce. When financial struggles hit, they welcomed me and my two children with open arms. Life seemed stable until my brother Jake announced he was moving back with his son. One day, I came home from work to find my children's belongings relocated to our damp basement. Mom smiled, saying, "Our other grandson deserves the best rooms." As my kids cried, I simply smiled and said, "Pack your bags." Where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and like this video to find out what my parents never saw coming. Life as a single mother wasn't something I had ever planned for myself. After my divorce from Daniel, I found myself working as an accountant at a local company in our Colorado town, earning just enough to keep us afloat. The job was stable but certainly not lucrative, especially when trying to support two growing children on a single income. My daughter Emma, 8 years old, with long brown hair and thoughtful eyes that seemed to understand more than a child her age should, had always been sensitive and perceptive. She loved reading, drawing elaborate pictures of fantasy worlds, and asking questions that sometimes left me searching for answers. Tyler, my 6-year-old son, was her complete opposite. Energetic, always, moving creative in ways that often left messes around the house, but with a smile that could melt the hardest heart. His dinosaur collection was his prized possession, carefully arranged by size and ferocity level, as he called it. Daniel and I had been high school sweethearts who married young. The cracks started appearing in our relationship after Tyler was born. The pressures of parenthood revealed how different we had become. The final breaking point came when I discovered text messages between him and his coworker. The divorce was messy, painful, and left me with not only emotional scars, but also a mountain of debt we had accumulated together. Daniel paid child support, but it was often late, and his visits with the kids became increasingly sporadic. He had a new life with a new partner, and my children were becoming footnotes in his story. The financial strain became unbearable 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was juggling mortgage payments, car payments, childcare costs, and trying to pay down credit card debt that had accumulated during the divorce proceedings. Each night, after putting the kids to bed, I would sit at the kitchen table with bills spread out before me, calculator in hand, trying to make numbers work that simply wouldn't. That's when I made the difficult decision to call my parents. Martha and Richard had been married for 35 years, living in the same 4-bedroom house where I grew up. They had both retired recently, Dad from his job as a high school principal, and Mom from her position as an administrative assistant. They were comfortable financially, having saved diligently throughout their working years. Our relationship had always been complicated. I loved them deeply, but there was always an undercurrent of criticism, particularly from my mother. Nothing I did quite measured up to the achievements of my younger brother Jake. He had been the star athlete, the valedictorian, the golden child, who moved to New York and became a senior manager at a prestigious firm. I had stayed closer to home, attended the state college, met Daniel, and settled down. In my parents' eyes, particularly my mother's, this was somehow less impressive. Despite these dynamics, when I called them explaining my situation, they immediately offered their home. "Family helps family," my father said firmly. My mother added, "The children need stability and we have the space." Moving back was humbling. Emma and Tyler shared the guest room while I took my old bedroom, still decorated with remnants of my teenage years. The first few months were actually pleasant, surprising me. My parents seemed to enjoy having young children in the house again. Dad would take Tyler fishing at the local pond and taught him how to play checkers. Mom would bake cookies with Emma and praised her artistic talents. For the first time in months, I could breathe a little easier knowing my children were safe and loved, while I focused on paying down debt and saving for our future. My brother Jake stayed in touch primarily through occasional video calls with our parents. He was always too busy to visit, even on major holidays. His marriage had ended about a year after mine, but under different circumstances. His ex-wife had moved to Europe for a job opportunity, and after a custody battle, Jake had been awarded primary custody of their son Sam, who was 7, right between Emma and Tyler in age. My parents would show me pictures and videos of Sam that Jake sent them, always with a hint of pride I rarely heard when they spoke about Emma and Tyler. "Look how tall Sam is getting," Mom would say. "He gets his height from Jake." "Sam won another chess tournament," Dad would announce. "He's got the Barnes intelligence, that one." I would smile and nod, trying not to let it bother me. After all, they were helping us when we needed it most. I could overlook these small slights for the sake of stability for my children. Despite these occasional remarks, life fell into a comfortable routine. I would get the kids ready for school each morning, drop them off on my way to work, pick them up afterward, or sometimes my parents would, and we would have dinner together as a family most nights. On weekends, we would help around the house, do yard work, or take day trips to nearby attractions. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. My children seemed happy I was slowly getting my finances in order, and I had even started putting aside a little money each month toward a down payment on a small home of our own someday. Then came the phone call that would disrupt everything. It was a Sunday evening in April when Jake called during our family dinner. I knew something was different the moment my mother answered. Her voice rose an octave, her entire demeanor shifted, and she rushed to put the call on speakerphone so everyone could hear the apparently important news. "I've decided to come home," Jake announced, his voice confident as always. "New York isn't the right place to raise Sam anymore. He needs family around him, stability, a yard to play in. My company is letting me work remotely, so we're moving back next month." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. My mother actually clapped her hands together in delight, while my father beamed with pride. "Son, that's wonderful news. This house has been too quiet without you." I sat there, fork suspended midway to my mouth, watching as my parents transformed before my eyes. My mother, who rarely showed excessive emotion, was practically giddy. My father, always reserved, was making grand pronouncements about how the family would be complete again. Emma and Tyler looked at me questioningly. I forced a smile. "You'll get to meet your cousin Sam," I explained, trying to sound enthusiastic for their sake. After dinner, while the kids were watching TV, I overheard my parents in the kitchen making plans. They were discussing which room would be best for Jake and which for Sam. "The guest room is largest, of course, Jake should have," that my mother said decisively, "and Sam should have a proper bedroom not sharing with anyone." My father agreed immediately. "We'll need to clean out the office and turn it back into a bedroom. It gets the best morning light, perfect for a growing boy." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Emma and Tyler were currently sharing the guest room my mother had just designated for Jake. Where exactly did she expect my children to sleep? I entered the kitchen, clearing my throat to announce my presence. "Where will Emma and Tyler sleep if Jake gets their room?" I asked directly. My mother looked at me as if she'd forgotten I was living there too. "Oh," she said, a slight frown crossing her face. "Well, there's the basement. We could fix it up nicely." Children adapt so easily at that age. The basement was unfinished with concrete floors and exposed pipes. It was used primarily for storage and laundry. I couldn't imagine my children sleeping down there. "Mom, that's not appropriate for young children. The basement isn't even properly insulated," I protested. My father stepped in, his tone placating. "Now, Shelby, we'll make it nice. Put down some carpet, maybe partition off a little area. It's temporary anyway, right? Until you get back on your feet." The way he said it made it clear they saw our presence as impermanent, while Jake's return was being treated as a homecoming of a rightful heir. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that this was their house, and they were doing us a favor by letting us stay. Still, the conversation left me unsettled. In the days that followed, subtle changes began to appear. My parents spent hours looking at photos and videos of Sam, commenting on his academic achievements, his athletic abilities, his perfect smile. "He's reading 2 grade levels ahead," my mother announced one evening. "Jake says his teachers can't challenge him enough." "Not like Tyler," she added, looking over at my son, who was struggling with his first grade homework. "Perhaps you should be working with him more, Shelby." These comparisons became more frequent and less subtle. Emma's artwork, once proudly displayed on the refrigerator, was taken down to make room for printed photos of Sam. Tyler's dinosaur collection, which had found a home on a shelf in the living room, was boxed up because it made the room look cluttered. My parents began canceling their standing play dates with my children. The weekly trip to the park with Dad was postponed because he needed to clean out the garage for Jake's things. The cookie baking sessions with Mom stopped because she was too busy redecorating for Sam's arrival. Emma noticed the shift. One night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked in a small voice, "Does Grandma not like us anymore? She seems mad all the time." I stroked her hair, searching for the right words. "Grandma's just excited about Uncle Jake coming home. She still loves you very much." Even as I said it, I wasn't sure if it was true anymore. The breaking point of this phase came during a family dinner 3 weeks before Jake's planned arrival. My mother had prepared a roast, Jake's favorite meal from childhood. As we ate, she dominated the conversation with plans for Jake and Sam. "We'll need to enroll Sam in the gifted program at school," she declared. "Jake says he's exceptionally bright." "The local school doesn't have a gifted program, Mom," I pointed out. "Emma attended the same elementary school I had as a child. It was a good school but small and with limited resources." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Well, they'll make one for Sam. A child like that needs special attention." I felt Emma stiffen beside me. She was a straight-A student herself, but my parents rarely acknowledged her academic achievements. Then my father cleared his throat. "Shelby, we need to discuss the household arrangements." I looked up from my plate, sensing what was coming. "This house is getting a bit crowded," he continued. "And with Jake and Sam coming, we need to establish some ground rules." "What kind of ground rules?" I asked cautiously. "Well, for one thing, your children need to be quieter. Sam needs a peaceful environment for his studies, and will need more help with household chores. Jake will be working, and we're not as young as we used to be." Translation: my children were a nuisance, and I was expected to become the housekeeper. I looked down at my plate, appetite gone, as my father continued listing expectations for our reduced status in the household. My children would have restricted access to the backyard to avoid disturbing Sam. The television viewing would be scheduled around Sam's preferences. The kitchen would need to accommodate Sam's specialized diet. As we cleared the dishes that night, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Shelby," she said, her voice low, "I need to remind you that this is our house. We make the rules here." The statement was clear in its implication. I should be grateful for whatever accommodations they were willing to make, no matter how unfair. I nodded silently, not trusting myself to speak, without saying something I might regret. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a growing sense of dread about what was to come. I tried to convince myself it wouldn't be as bad as I feared. Perhaps when Jake actually arrived, things would settle down. Perhaps my parents would find enough love in their hearts for all their grandchildren equally. But deep down, I knew better. The writing was on the wall. In my parents' eyes, Jake and Sam were returning royalty, while my children and I were merely servants, living on their charity. Something would have to change, but I wasn't yet sure what or how. The day everything changed started like any other workday. I woke up at 6, prepared breakfast for Emma and Tyler, packed their lunches, and got them dressed and ready for school. My mother was already in the kitchen when we came down, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone. "Jake texted," she announced without looking up. "They're arriving tomorrow instead of next week. His company gave him extra time off for the relocation." My stomach dropped. Tomorrow. But it's Thursday. I have a big project due at work on Friday. She finally looked up, her expression unsympathetic. "Well, we'll manage. Richard and I can pick the kids up from school so you can work late if you need to." I nodded, grateful at least for that offer. The end-of-quarter financial reports were crucial, and my boss had already granted me flexibility for family emergencies, but I didn't want to push my luck by asking for more time off. After dropping the kids at school, I drove to the accounting firm where I'd worked for the past 3 years. The office was small but comfortable, and my colleagues had been supportive throughout my divorce and subsequent financial struggles. My desk was piled high with documents that needed processing for the quarterly reports, and I dove into work trying to push my family concerns aside. Around 10 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "How many rooms do we actually need for your kids? Jake is bringing more furniture than expected." I stared at the message, a cold feeling creeping up my spine. What did he mean, how many rooms? Emma and Tyler already shared one room. Were they considering squeezing them into an even smaller space? "They need their room, Dad," I texted back firmly. "They already share. There's nowhere else for them to go." His response was delayed, finally coming through nearly an hour later. "We'll figure something out." The vague reply did nothing to ease my concerns, but I was swamped with work and couldn't afford to dwell on it. By lunchtime, I had received 3 more texts from my mother, all about Jake and Sam's arrival. What foods to stock for Sam? Which sheets Jake preferred? Did I remember that Sam was allergic to peanuts? None of these messages acknowledged my earlier concerns about my own children's accommodations. As the afternoon wore on, I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on the financial spreadsheets before me. Around 3, my phone buzzed again. It was my mother. We picked up Emma and Tyler. "Don't rush home. We're sorting out the rooms." Something in the phrasing sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Sorting out the rooms could mean anything. I tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted Emma, who had just gotten her first phone for emergencies, but received no response. The knot in my stomach tightened. I looked at the clock then, at the stack of work on my desk. I should stay at least until 5, preferably until 6, to make significant progress on the project. But the silence from home was deafening. At 3:30, I couldn't take it anymore. I approached my supervisor, explained that I had a family emergency, and promised to make up the hours over the weekend. She was understanding, and I left the office with my laptop, intending to continue working from home after checking on the situation. The 20-minute drive home felt interminable. As I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, everything looked normal from the outside. The spring flowers my mother had planted were blooming, the lawn was freshly mowed, and my father's car was parked in its usual spot. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I entered through the side door that led directly into the kitchen. My mother was there, rearranging items in the refrigerator. She seemed surprised to see me. "You're home early," she remarked, her tone slightly accusatory. "Where are Emma and Tyler?" I asked, setting down my work bag. "Downstairs," she replied casually, turning back to the refrigerator. "They're getting settled." "Downstairs." "In the basement," I clarified, my voice rising slightly. She closed the refrigerator door and faced me. "Well, yes. We had to make room for Jake and Sam. They'll be here tomorrow, and nothing was ready." Without waiting for further explanation, I headed for the basement door. As I descended the creaky wooden steps, I heard muffled crying. The basement was dimly lit, with only 2 small window wells letting in limited natural light. The air was cool and slightly damp, with the faint smell of laundry detergent and old cardboard boxes. In the corner furthest from the washing machine, I found my children. Emma was sitting on an old futon that had been stored down there for years, her arms around Tyler, who was sobbing into her shoulder. Around them were piles of their belongings, hastily transported from their upstairs room. Their clothes were in garbage bags rather than properly packed. Tyler's dinosaur collection lay in a jumbled heap, several pieces broken in the careless move. "Mom," Emma exclaimed when she saw me, relief washing over her tear-streaked face. "They took all our stuff. They said we have to live down here now." Tyler looked up, his small face contorted with confusion and hurt. "Did we do something bad, Mommy? Grandma said this is where we belong now." My heart shattered into a million pieces. I knelt beside them, gathering both children into my arms. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Not a single thing." I took a deep breath, surveying the basement. My parents had made minimal efforts to make it habitable. The futon had been unfolded into its bed position, with some old sheets thrown on it. A couple of floor lamps had been brought down for lighting, but the space remained fundamentally unsuitable for children. The concrete floor was cold, there was no proper ventilation, and I could see water stains in one corner from previous minor flooding. "Stay here for just a minute," I told my children, giving them each another hug. "I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa." I climbed the stairs slowly, my shock giving way to a cold, clear anger. When I reached the kitchen, both my parents were there, my father having joined my mother. They were discussing dinner plans as if nothing unusual had happened. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. My father looked up. "Now, Shelby, don't make this difficult. Jake and Sam need proper rooms. The basement is perfectly adequate for temporary use." "Adequate?" I repeated. "The basement floods when it rains heavily. There's no proper heating or cooling down there. There are exposed pipes and electrical boxes. It's not a bedroom, it's a storage space." My mother folded her arms. "We raised you better than to be so selfish. Sam deserves the best room in the house. He's a special boy with special needs." "And my children don't matter?" I asked, still maintaining that eerie calm. "Of course they matter," my father interjected. "But this is our house, Shelby. We decide how the space is used." "Jake has always been more successful than you," my mother added the comment, seemingly coming from nowhere, yet revealing everything about her mindset. Sam is our true Barnes heir. Your children are. Well, they carry their father's name, don't they? The statement hung in the air between us, its cruelty all the more shocking for how casually it was delivered. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I'd just heard. Mom, they're your grandchildren too, I finally managed. She shrugged, turning away to check something in the oven. Of course they are, and they should be grateful for whatever we provide, just like you should be. My father nodded in agreement. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go, Shelby. The least you can do is accommodate Jake's return. He's bringing prestige back to this family. I looked between them, truly seeing them, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. These weren't the loving parents I'd idealized despite their flaws. These were people capable of treating innocent children as second-class citizens in their own family. At that moment, Emma appeared at the top of the basement stairs. Mom, she called hesitantly. Tyler's asking if we can go back to our old house. He doesn't understand why Grandma doesn't want us anymore. My mother had the audacity to look offended. That's not true. I never said I didn't want them. They're just making a fuss over nothing as usual. Tyler always was a sensitive child. You should toughen him up, Shelby. Emma's eyes filled with tears again. But Grandma, you told us that Sam needs our room because he's special and we're not. You said we should be happy with the basement because some children don't have homes at all. My mother flushed, caught in her cruelty by the honest words of a child. My father stepped in his tone condescending. Emma, adults make decisions that children don't always understand. Sometimes we have to make hard choices for the good of the family. I looked at my daughter standing small but dignified, despite her tears, then back at my parents. In that moment, something crystallized within me. A decision I should have made long before now. I smiled, a calm settling over me that felt like clarity after a lifetime of fog. Emma, sweetheart, go back downstairs and tell Tyler to pack his favorite things. Only what's most important. My parents exchanged confused glances. What are you doing? My father demanded. I maintained my smile. Exactly what you've asked. We're packing our bags. The look of bewilderment on my parents' faces would have been comical under different circumstances. They clearly hadn't expected me to take such a definitive stand. My father recovered first, his expression hardening. Don't be ridiculous, Shelby. Where would you even go? You can't afford a place of your own yet. My mother nodded emphatically. You're being dramatic. The basement is perfectly fine until you save enough for your own place. I maintained my composed smile, which seemed to unnerve them more than if I had shouted. Emma, go help your brother pack, please. Just essentials for tonight. As Emma disappeared down the basement stairs, I turned back to my stunned parents. I'll be back for the rest of our things tomorrow, I said calmly. This is absurd, my father spluttered. You're punishing us because we asked you to make a small sacrifice for your brother. After all we've done for you. I took a deep breath, determined not to let my anger overtake the strange sense of peace I was feeling. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting my children. There's a difference. From what my mother demanded. A little discomfort. Life isn't fair, Shelby. You should be teaching your children that lesson instead of coddling them. I looked at her. Really looked at her, wondering how I'd never fully seen the coldness beneath her maternal facade. I'm teaching them that they deserve respect, Mom. That they don't have to accept being treated as less than. My father stepped toward me, his voice lowered in what I recognized as his attempt to be reasonable. Let's all calm down. You're upset, we understand. But making rash decisions won't help anyone. Where will you go tonight? A hotel. That's money you can't afford to waste. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told them because I'd been waiting for the right moment, was that I wasn't as financially dependent as they assumed. For the past year, I had been tucking away every spare dollar, cutting corners wherever possible, bringing lunch to work instead of buying it, canceling streaming services, buying secondhand clothes for the kids. I had been approved for a modest mortgage on a small 3-bedroom house just 10 minutes away. The closing was scheduled for the end of the month, but I had arranged with the seller to rent the property early if needed. I had been planning to surprise my parents with the news this weekend, imagining their proud smiles, perhaps even an acknowledgement that I had managed to get back on my feet despite the challenges. Now the thought seemed laughably naive. We'll be fine, I said, simply offering no further explanation. My mother's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You've been planning this, haven't you? Playing the victim while plotting behind our backs. The accusation was so backward I almost laughed. No, Mom. I've been planning to stand on my own 2 feet again. There's a difference. I headed to my room to pack my own essentials, my parents trailing behind me, still protesting. As I pulled a suitcase from the closet, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my colleague Sarah. Everything okay? You left in a hurry. I quickly texted back, family emergency. Need a favor. Can the kids and I stay with you tonight? Sarah's response was immediate. Of course. Guest room is yours. Everything all right. I felt a wave of gratitude for true friendship. We'll explain later. Be there around 6. My father stood in the doorway of my bedroom as I packed, his arms crossed. This is how you repay our generosity. By storming out because we asked for one small compromise. I continued packing methodically. You moved my children into an unfinished basement without even discussing it with me first. That's not a small compromise, Dad. That's a complete disregard for them as human beings. You're exaggerating as usual, my mother cut in from behind him. The basement is perfectly adequate. We would have fixed it up more given time. I zipped my suitcase closed. The issue isn't the basement, Mom. It's that you see my children as less deserving than Sam. Less important, less valuable. That's not true, she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine, unable to maintain contact in the face of the truth. I brushed past them, suitcase in hand, and headed for the basement. Emma had helped Tyler pack his dinosaur collection and some clothes into his school backpack. They both looked up at me with such trust that my heart clenched. These children deserved so much better than what my parents were offering. Ready to go on an adventure? I asked, injecting enthusiasm into my voice. Tyler's eyes widened. Where are we going, Mommy? We're going to stay with my friend Sarah tonight. She has a nice house with a big backyard and a dog named Butterscotch. Tyler's face lit up at the mention of a dog, momentarily forgetting his distress. Emma, more perceptive, gave me a questioning look. Are we coming back here, Mom? I knelt to her level. Not to live, sweetheart. We're going to have our own place very soon. I've been saving for it, and it's almost ready for us. Her eyes widened in surprise, then understanding dawned. Is that why you never bought new shoes, even though yours have holes? I nodded, touched by her observation. Exactly. Sometimes we have to make small sacrifices for something better in the future. We gathered their most important belongings, leaving behind things we could retrieve later. As we climbed the basement stairs, my parents were waiting in the kitchen, their expressions, a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. This is ridiculous, my father said, his voice less certain now. Where will you live? How will you manage? I've been approved for a mortgage, I revealed, feeling a small satisfaction at their shocked expressions. The house is small, but it's ours. We were supposed to move in at the end of the month, but I'll see if we can arrange something earlier. You bought a house. Without telling us, my mother demanded, sounding betrayed, as if I had somehow deceived her by becoming independent. I was going to surprise you this weekend, I admitted. I thought you'd be proud. Something flickered in my father's eyes. Perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him today. Shelby, don't do this. You're upset, I understand. We can work something out. The kids can have their room back. But it was too late. The damage was done, the truth revealed. They hadn't seen me as an adult working toward independence, but as a dependent they could control through their generosity. They hadn't seen my children as individuals deserving of love and respect, but as burdens to be tolerated and housed according to their perceived value. I'll call tomorrow about picking up the rest of our things, I said, guiding Emma and Tyler toward the door. Please have them ready. I don't want to drag this out. As we stepped outside into the early evening light, Tyler looked back at the house uncertainly. Aren't Grandma and Grandpa coming with us? No, sweetheart, I replied gently. They're staying here to get ready for Uncle Jake and Sam. Don't they love us anymore? He asked, his lower lip trembling. I knelt beside him on the driveway, aware of my parents watching from the window. They do love you in their own way, but sometimes love isn't enough if it comes with conditions. And you, my amazing kiddos, deserve unconditional love. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My parents stood in the doorway, looking small and suddenly old. For a moment, I felt a pang of regret, not for my decision, but for the relationship that could have been if they had been capable of seeing beyond their favoritism. In the back seat, Emma reached over and took Tyler's hand. "It's okay," she told him. "We're going to have our own house, and Mom will never make us sleep in a basement." Her faith in me was both touching and terrifying. As I drove towards Sarah's house, I made a silent vow to never make my children feel the way my parents had made mine feel today. They would always know they were valued, respected, and unconditionally loved. The next morning, after a night of restless sleep on Sarah's pull-out couch, I called my boss to request an emergency personal day. To my relief, she was understanding, especially when I briefly explained the situation. "Family comes first," she assured me. "The reports can wait until Monday." Sarah had already left for work, but not before making breakfast for Emma and Tyler and assuring me we could stay as long as needed. Her kindness was overwhelming, a sharp contrast to my parents' conditional support. Around 10 in the morning, I called a local moving company and arranged for a small truck to help retrieve our belongings. The earliest they could come was 2 in the afternoon, which gave me time to call the real estate agent handling my new house purchase. "Mrs. Davis, I'm facing a family emergency," I explained. "Is there any possibility of moving up the rental agreement before closing, even just for a couple of weeks?" After some negotiation and an agreement to pay a slightly higher deposit, it was arranged. We could move in on Saturday, just 2 days away. The relief I felt was immense. With these arrangements in place, I braced myself for the most difficult part of the day, returning to my parents' house to collect our belongings. I decided it would be best if Emma and Tyler stayed with our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, who had graciously offered to watch them for a few hours. At precisely 2 o'clock, I pulled into my parents' driveway with the moving truck following behind. My father opened the door before I even had a chance to knock, his expression grim. "So you're really going through with this?" he said, his tone somewhere between accusatory and incredulous. "Yes, I am," I replied, simply stepping inside. "Are our things ready?" My mother appeared from the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed. She had been crying, which momentarily caught me off guard. In all my childhood, I had rarely seen her cry. "Your room is as you left it," she said stiffly. "The children's things are still in the basement." I nodded, directing the movers first to my room. As they began carrying out boxes and furniture, my father followed me around like a shadow, occasionally trying to restart the conversation. "This is completely unnecessary, you know," he said as I supervised the movers taking my dresser. "We could have worked something out." I turned to face him directly. "Dad, you moved my children into a basement without even discussing it with me. What else might you have decided without my input if I had stayed?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We were just trying to prepare for Jake. You know how important first impressions are. More important than my children's well-being." He had no answer for that. As the movers headed to the basement for the kids' belongings, the doorbell rang. My father went to answer it, and to my surprise, I heard Jake's voice. My brother had arrived a day early. When Jake entered the living room and saw the movers, confusion crossed his face. He was taller than I remembered, his business suit expensive, his haircut precise. Behind him trailed a small boy with the same sharp features, looking around curiously. "Shelby." "What's going on?" Jake asked, looking between me and our parents. Before I could answer, my mother rushed to embrace him. "Jake, Sam. You're early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." She fussed over them both, ushering them further into the house, while pointedly ignoring the moving activity. "Look how handsome you are, Sam. Just like your father at your age." Jake extricated himself from our mother's embrace, his eyes still on me. "Seriously, what's happening? Are you moving out?" "She's having a tantrum," my father interjected, "because we asked her children to use the basement room temporarily." Jake's eyebrows rose. "The basement. Isn't it unfinished?" "It's perfectly adequate," my mother insisted, "but Shelby thinks her children deserve special treatment." I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Special treatment. Like not being relegated to an unsuitable space without discussion. Like being treated with basic respect. Jake looked uncomfortable, glancing at Sam, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Maybe we should discuss this later," he suggested. "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, turning my attention back to the movers who were bringing up Tyler's bed frame. "I'm taking my children somewhere they'll be valued." "You're being melodramatic," my mother snapped. We've done nothing but help you since your divorce. Help comes without strings, Mom. What you've offered is control disguised as generosity. The moving truck was nearly full now. I did a final walkthrough of the rooms to ensure we hadn't forgotten anything essential. As I checked the basement one last time, I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. It was Jake. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Can we talk for a minute?" I turned to face him, arms crossed defensively. "About what?" He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture reminiscent of our childhood. "I didn't know they were going to put your kids in the basement. That's pretty messed up. Would it have made a difference if you had known I challenged?" He looked away. "I don't know. Maybe." His honesty at least was refreshing. "It doesn't matter now. We're leaving." "Where will you go?" "I bought a house," I said, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. "It's small, but it's ours." Surprise registered on his face. "You did? That's great, Shelby. Really." His apparent sincerity caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed the brother I had grown up with before our parents' favoritism had driven a wedge between us. "Thanks," I said somewhat stiffly. "I should go. The movers are waiting." As we climbed the stairs, Jake said, "For what it's worth, I think Mom and Dad are wrong. No child should be made to feel less important than another." I paused, looking back at him. "Then maybe you should tell them that." Back in the living room, my parents were showing Sam around, pointing out family photos and telling him stories about Jake's childhood achievements. They barely glanced up as I informed them that the movers were finished. "I'll need my house key back," my father said, his voice cold. I removed it from my keychain and placed it on the table without comment. "I hope you realize what you're throwing away," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "All because you couldn't make one simple accommodation for your brother." "That's not fair," Mom Jake unexpectedly interjected. "The basement isn't appropriate for children." She looked at him in surprise. "You haven't even seen it yet, Jake. It's perfectly fine." "I just did see it," he replied. "It's a storage room with a futon. I wouldn't want Sam down there either." My mother's face flushed. "Well, of course we would have fixed it up more if Shelby had given us time instead of overreacting." "Like you fixed up the guest room for Jake?" I asked pointedly. "With new curtains and fresh paint within hours of his phone call." My father stepped forward. "That's enough, Shelby. If you're determined to leave, then leave. But don't expect us to bail you out when this independent living experiment fails." The dismissiveness of his statement stung more than I cared to admit. "I don't need bailing out, Dad. I needed parents who valued all their grandchildren equally. Clearly that was too much to ask." Just then, small footsteps pattered down the stairs. Sam had apparently been exploring the house on his own, and now appeared looking curious. "Is this where I'm going to sleep?" he asked, pointing at a family photo of Emma and Tyler in their now former bedroom. Before my parents could answer, Jake knelt beside his son. "No, buddy. You'll have a different room." "Okay," Sam said easily, then looked at me. "Are you my aunt? Dad told me about you. Where are my cousins I brought my trading cards to share?" The innocent question, free of the adult's tension, momentarily softened the atmosphere. "Yes, I'm your Aunt Shelby. Your cousins are at a neighbor's house right now, but maybe you'll meet them another time." "Why aren't they here?" Sam persisted. I hesitated, unsure how to answer appropriately. Jake saved me from having to respond. "We'll talk about it later, Sam," he said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Right now, Aunt Shelby needs to go." I nodded gratefully at Jake, then turned to my parents. "I'll have Emma and Tyler call you when they're ready. Please don't push before then." My mother looked as if she wanted to protest, but my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Fine," he said curtly. "Goodbye, Shelby." It was a dismissal, plain and simple. I walked out without another word, the finality of the door closing behind me, both painful and strangely liberating. As I joined the movers in their truck to lead them to Sarah's house, where we would temporarily store our belongings, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for what could have been anger at my parents' behavior, anxiety about the future. But beneath it all was a surprising sense of strength. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself and my children without backing down. The road ahead would be challenging, but as I drove away from my childhood home, I knew with certainty that I had made the right decision. My children deserved better. and so did I. The small three-bedroom house I had purchased was nothing like my parents' spacious home. The kitchen cabinets were outdated, the carpeting was worn in spots, and the backyard was barely large enough for a modest swing set. But when I opened the door for Emma and Tyler on that Saturday morning, their reactions made every penny of my down payment worth it. "Is this really ours, Mom?" Emma asked, her eyes wide as she explored the living room. "The whole house?" "Yes, sweetheart," I confirmed, watching as she ran her hand along the wall as if to make sure it was real. "Every square inch belongs to us." Tyler was already racing from room to room, his earlier sadness forgotten in the excitement of new exploration. "Which room is mine? Can I have my own room? Can I paint it green for my dinosaurs?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Yes, you can have your own room, and we'll see about the green paint." The moving truck arrived shortly after, and with Sarah's help, we began the process of turning the empty house into our home. By nightfall, we had assembled the beds, organized the kitchen essentials, and set up a makeshift living room with our couch and television. That first night, after tucking the children into their new beds in their new rooms, I sat on the floor of my unfurnished bedroom, exhausted but oddly content. My phone had been silent all day, no calls or texts from my parents. I wasn't surprised, but a small part of me had hoped they might reach out, if only to check that their grandchildren were settled safely. The first few weeks were challenging. The house revealed its quirks and minor issues, a leaky faucet here, a sticky door there. I worked extra hours to make up for the time I had taken off during our hasty move, often staying up late after the children were asleep to complete projects remotely. Money was tighter than ever with the new mortgage payment, but we adapted, finding free community activities for entertainment and shopping sales for necessities. Emma and Tyler adjusted to our new life with remarkable resilience. Emma took on more responsibility, helping with dishes and laundry without being asked. Tyler made friends with the neighbor's son, a boisterous 8-year-old who shared his passion for dinosaurs. They both seemed to bloom in the absence of my parents' critical gaze. Sarah remained a steadfast support, stopping by with homemade meals or offering to watch the kids when I needed to work late. My coworkers, too, rallied around us. My boss approved a flexible schedule that allowed me to drop off and pick up the children from school, and a senior accountant mentored me for a potential promotion that would increase my salary. Through it all, the silence from my parents was deafening. No calls, no texts, not even a message passed through mutual acquaintances. It was as if we had ceased to exist in their world. I tried to hide my hurt from Emma and Tyler, but occasionally they would ask about their grandparents. "Does Grandma still not want to see us?" Tyler asked one evening, as I tucked him in the question, catching me off guard. I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Grandma and Grandpa are busy with Uncle Jake and Sam right now. Sometimes adults make choices that have nothing to do with how wonderful you are." He seemed to consider this, his small brow furrowed. "But we have our own house now. They could visit us instead." "Yes, they could," I agreed, smoothing his hair. "And maybe someday they will. But right now we're doing just fine on our own, aren't we?" He nodded, his concerns momentarily forgotten, as he launched into a detailed description of a new dinosaur fact he had learned at school. 3 months after our move, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Johnson, our former neighbor. "Shelby, I thought you should know. Your brother was loading boxes into his car today. It looked like he and the boy might be moving out." The news surprised me. Jake had just settled back in town, supposedly for Sam's stability. Why would he be leaving so soon? "Did my parents say anything to you about it?" I asked. "No, they've been keeping to themselves lately," she replied, "not even joining the neighborhood barbecues. Your mother looks tired whenever I see her." I thanked her for the information, unsure what to make of it. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction that perhaps Jake's homecoming hadn't been the perfect family reunion my parents had envisioned. But another part felt genuine concern. Despite everything, they were still my family. A week later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, Jake's voice came through, sounding strained. "Shelby, it's me. Do you have a minute to talk?" I stepped outside onto our small patio where I could keep an eye on the children playing in the backyard while speaking privately. "I'm listening." He sighed heavily. "Look, I owe you an apology. A big one. I had no idea how bad things were going to get when I moved back." "What do you mean?" I asked, cautious but curious. Mom and Dad. They're impossible to live with, he admitted. The expectations, the constant criticism, the way they hover over Sam like he's some kind of performing monkey. I can't take it anymore. The admission was so unexpected that I found myself speechless for a moment. But they adore you, I finally managed. You're the favorite. You've always been. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, until I failed to live up to their impossible standards. Did you know Dad lectured me for an hour because Sam got a B on a math test? A single B. The kid is 7 for crying out loud. So the rumors are true. You're moving out. Got an apartment downtown, he confirmed. I start moving in tomorrow. I can't subject Sam to their microscope anymore. He's becoming anxious, afraid to make mistakes. I thought of Emma and Tyler playing freely in our modest backyard, laughing without restraint. I'm sorry it didn't work out, I said, and meant it. They talk about you, you know, Jake continued. They complain that you abandoned them, but I think they're really just hurt that you managed to stand on your own 2 feet. They liked having you dependent on them. The insight was surprisingly perceptive coming from Jake, who had never seemed particularly attuned to family dynamics before. They haven't even tried to contact us, I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Their pride, he replied simply. They don't know how to admit they were wrong. He paused, then added hesitantly. Sam keeps asking about his cousins. He was really looking forward to meeting them. I watched as Tyler chased Emma with the garden hose, both of them shrieking with laughter. Maybe we could arrange something, I suggested. A play date at the park, just the kids. I'd like that, Jake said, sounding relieved. And Shelby, I really am sorry. For everything. For not seeing how they treated you all these years. The apology, unexpected but seemingly sincere, opened a small door in my heart that I had thought permanently closed. Thank you, I said simply. We arranged to meet that weekend at a local park. I was nervous about how the children would interact given all that had happened, but my concerns proved unfounded. Sam was a quiet, thoughtful boy who bonded with Emma over a shared love of reading while Tyler enthusiastically showed him his dinosaur collection. As Jake and I sat on a park bench watching them play, he filled me in on the past few months at our parents' house. The perfect homecoming had quickly devolved into a stressful situation. Our parents micromanaged every aspect of Sam's life, from his diet to his bedtime routine to his study habits. They questioned Jake's parenting decisions and made constant comparisons to how they had raised him. I finally understand what you went through, Jake admitted. The constant criticism, the impossible standards, it's exhausting. It was worse for the kids, I said, seeing them treated as less than Sam would have been. He nodded soberly. That's what finally pushed me to move out. Last week, Sam accidentally spilled juice on the living room carpet. Mom completely overreacted, saying he was becoming undisciplined like his cousins. That's when I knew we had to go. The revelation that my parents had continued to disparage my children, even in their absence, stung, but it also confirmed that I had made the right decision in leaving. Have you told them you're moving out yet? I asked. Jake grimaced. Yesterday, Dad called me ungrateful. Mom cried and said I was breaking her heart just like you did. Emotional manipulation, I noted. Their specialty. They asked if I was moving in with you, he added with a wry smile. Apparently that would be the ultimate betrayal. I laughed despite myself. And are you moving in with me? God, no, he replied quickly, then looked embarrassed. I mean, your house is great, but I think we both need our own space. I agreed wholeheartedly. Our relationship as siblings was fragile, newly forming after years of distance created by our parents' favoritism. Living together would likely strain it beyond repair. As we watched our children playing together, their laughter a healing balm to the family wounds, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. My parents' rejection had been painful, but it had also freed me from a lifetime of seeking approval I would never fully receive. Jake turned to me, his expression serious. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with Mom and Dad? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Not as long as they can't acknowledge how they hurt my children. Emma and Tyler deserve better. He nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I think you're an amazing mother. The way you stood up for them. The way you've built this new life. I hope I can be half as good a parent to Sam. The compliment coming from the brother who had always seemed to have everything I lacked meant more than I could express. Thanks, Jake. That means a lot. As the sun began to set, we gathered our children and promised to meet again soon. Driving home with Emma and Tyler chattering excitedly about their cousin in the back seat, I realized that while one chapter of our family story had closed, perhaps another was just beginning to be written. 2 weeks after our successful park meetup with Jake and Sam, I was planting flowers in our small front garden when a familiar car pulled up to the curb. My heart lurched as I recognized my parents' sedan. For a moment I considered retreating inside, but something made me stand my ground garden trowel still in hand. My parents emerged from the car, looking older and more hesitant than I remembered. My mother clutched her purse tightly against her chest, a nervous habit she'd had for as long as I could remember. My father stood slightly behind her, his face unreadable. "Shelby," my mother said by way of greeting, her voice strained. "Your garden looks nice." Such a mundane observation after months of silence struck me as absurd, but I merely nodded. "Thank you. What brings you here?" They exchanged glances. "Can we come in?" my father asked. "To talk." I considered the request. Emma and Tyler were inside watching Saturday morning cartoons. I wasn't ready to expose them to my parents again, not without knowing their intentions. "We can talk out here," I decided, gesturing to the porch swing. "The kids are inside." A flash of hurt crossed my mother's face, but they complied, settling awkwardly on the swing while I perched on the porch railing facing them. "Jake moved out," my father stated flatly, as if this explained their presence. "I know," I replied. "We've been in touch." This clearly surprised them. My mother's eyebrows rose. He didn't tell us that." "There's a lot you don't know," I said simply. "Why are you here, Mom, Dad?" My mother fidgeted with the clasp of her purse. "We miss the children," she finally admitted. "The house is so quiet now." I felt a surge of anger at the implied message. They missed having children around, not necessarily my children specifically. "Emma and Tyler are doing well," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "They've adjusted to our new home." "It's very small," my father observed, glancing around critically. "It's enough for us," I replied firmly. "And it's ours." An uncomfortable silence settled between us. I waited, determined that they would be the ones to bridge this gap if they truly wanted reconciliation. Finally, my mother spoke again. "We may have been hasty in our decisions that day." It was as close to an apology as I had ever heard from her. My father nodded in agreement. The basement wasn't an appropriate place for the children. We see that now. Their half-hearted acknowledgement fell far short of what I needed to hear, but it was a start. "It wasn't about the basement," I clarified. "It was about how you valued one grandchild above the others. It was about respect." My father looked away, unable to meet my gaze. My mother pressed her lips together in a thin line. "We never said we didn't value Emma and Tyler," she protested weakly. "You didn't have to say it. Your actions showed it clearly enough." I took a deep breath, determined to remain calm. "Do you know what Emma asked me that day? She asked if you didn't love them anymore." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Of course we love them. How could they think otherwise?" "Because you treated them as disposable," I answered honestly. "As less important than Sam. Children understand more than we give them credit for." My father cleared his throat, Jake says. "He says we did the same to you growing up, that we always favored him." He sounded genuinely confused, as if the thought had never occurred to him before Jake pointed it out. I stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, you compared us constantly. My grades were never quite as good as Jake's. My achievements were never quite as impressive. Nothing I did was ever enough." "We were pushing you to excel," my mother interjected defensively. "No, you were pushing me to be Jake. There's a difference." Another uncomfortable silence fell. Inside, I could hear the children laughing at something on television. The sound seemed to draw my mother's attention. "Could we see them?" she asked hesitantly. "Just for a few minutes." I considered the request carefully. Not today, I decided. They're just beginning to feel secure here. I won't disrupt that unless I'm confident it's in their best interest. My father's face hardened. "So you're keeping our grandchildren from us out of spite?" "No," I corrected firmly. "I'm protecting my children from being hurt again. There's a difference." My mother began to cry in earnest now. We've lost everyone, she lamented. First you, then Jake. Now the grandchildren, too. I felt a pang of sympathy despite myself. They were older, set in their ways, and genuinely seemed not to understand the consequences of their actions. But sympathy wasn't enough to risk my children's emotional well-being. You haven't lost anyone, I said more gently. You've just lost the ability to control everyone. We're still here, still family, but on different terms now. What terms? My father asked warily. Equal respect for all your grandchildren. No favorites, no comparisons. And a genuine apology to Emma and Tyler for how they were treated. My parents exchanged glances. These conditions clearly made them uncomfortable. We should be able to see our grandchildren without conditions, my father argued. I shook my head. That's not how this works anymore. My children aren't a resource you can access regardless of how you treat them. They're people who deserve respect. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We do respect them, Shelby. We always have. Moving them to the basement without discussion wasn't respectful, I pointed out. Telling them another child deserved better than they did wasn't respectful. My father sighed heavily. What do you want from us, Shelby? To admit we were wrong. Fine. We were wrong. Is that enough? The grudging admission, clearly given only to appease me rather than from genuine understanding, wasn't what I had hoped for. But it was something. It's a start, I acknowledged, but rebuilding trust takes time. Emma and Tyler need to see consistent behavior, not just hear words. As if on cue, the front door opened and Tyler peeked out, curious about the visitors. When he recognized my parents, he froze, uncertainty crossing his small face. Grandma, Grandpa, he said tentatively. My mother half rose from the swing, her arms instinctively opening, but Tyler remained in the doorway looking to me for guidance. I gave him a reassuring smile. They came to say hello, I explained. They missed you. Tyler seemed to consider this information seriously. Did they miss Emma, too? They said she was too noisy before. The innocent question clearly stung my parents. My mother sank back onto the swing, her expression stricken. We missed both of you very much, my father answered, his voice rough with emotion. Tyler nodded solemnly. We have our own house now. Mom says we don't have to sleep in basements anymore. My father winced at the simple statement. No, you don't, he agreed quietly. Emma appeared behind Tyler, her expression more guarded than her brother's. At almost 9, she understood more of the nuances of what had happened. Hello, Grandma. Hello, Grandpa, she said formally, keeping one hand on the doorframe as if ready to retreat inside if necessary. Hello, sweetheart, my mother replied, her voice wavering. You look like you've grown taller. Emma nodded but didn't move closer. We have to finish our cartoon now, she said, gently pulling Tyler back inside. It was nice to see you. The door closed behind them, the polite dismissal crystal clear. My parents looked shell-shocked by the brief interaction. They're afraid of us, my mother whispered, horrified. Not afraid, I corrected. Cautious. You hurt them. They need time. My father stood suddenly. This was a mistake. Coming here. They clearly don't want to see us. I stood as well, forcing him to meet my gaze. They do want to see you, but they want to see grandparents who value them, not ones who see them as second best. Can you be those grandparents, Dad, Mom? Can you love them for exactly who they are, not how they compare to Sam or anyone else? The question hung in the air between us. My mother looked away first. We should go, she said quietly, rising from the swing. Thank you for talking to us. They walked back to their car in silence, shoulders slumped in defeat. As they pulled away from the curb, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness for what could have been disappointment, that they still couldn't truly acknowledge their behavior, but also a sense of strength in having maintained my boundaries. Inside, I found Emma and Tyler huddled together on the couch, the cartoon forgotten. Are they gone? Emma asked. I sat between them, putting an arm around each. Yes. They wanted to see you, but I think they need some time to understand some important things first. Like how to be nice, Tyler suggested. I smiled sadly. Something like that, buddy. We don't need them, Emma declared, with the fierce loyalty of a child. We have you and Uncle Jake and Sam now, and Sarah. We're okay. Her words warmed my heart, though I hoped someday she might have a relationship with her grandparents again, one built on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. In the year that followed, our lives settled into a new normal. I received the promotion at work, easing our financial situation considerably. Emma joined the school debate team and discovered a talent for public speaking. Tyler's dinosaur phase evolved into a broader interest in science and nature. Our house slowly transformed from a shelter into a true home with fresh paint on the walls, family photos on display, and a swing set in the backyard. Jake and Sam became regular fixtures in our lives. The cousins grew close with Sam, often spending weekends at our house while Jake worked. My brother and I developed the adult relationship we'd never had a chance to form under our parents' influence, built on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than comparison and competition. My parents made sporadic attempts at reconciliation, sometimes dropping off gifts for the children or sending cards on birthdays and holidays. Each time I maintained my boundaries, requiring acknowledgement of past behavior before allowing more significant contact. They struggled with this requirement, their pride and long-established patterns difficult to break. 6 months after their visit to my house, they invited us to a neutral location, a local ice cream parlor, for a supervised visit. It went better than I expected. My father made a genuine effort to engage with Emma about her debate team, while my mother listened patiently to Tyler's detailed explanation of how dinosaurs evolved into birds. They made no comparisons to Sam, no comments about their house being bigger or better than ours. It was a small step, but an important one. Over time, these meetings became more regular, always in neutral locations, always with me present. Slowly, cautiously, a new type of relationship began to form. Not the one I had longed for as a child, but perhaps one that was healthier for all of us. Through it all, I came to understand an important truth. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about what you're fighting against, but what you're fighting for. I hadn't left my parents' house that day just to escape their favoritism. I had left to show my children that they deserved unconditional love and respect. That lesson, more than any material comfort or family tradition, was the true inheritance I wanted to pass on to them. On the 1-year anniversary of our move, we hosted a backyard barbecue at our home. Jake and Sam were there, along with Sarah and other friends who had supported us through the transition. To my surprise, my parents had also accepted the invitation, bringing a homemade apple pie and awkward but genuine attempts at conversation. As I watched Emma teaching Sam how to play badminton while Tyler showed my father his science project, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The family we had now wasn't perfect. Wasn't what I had imagined as a child, but it was real and honest in a way it had never been before. Sometimes you have to smile, pack your bags, and walk away from toxic situations to find where you truly belong. Home isn't about the size of the house or the prestige of the address. It's about creating a space where everyone feels valued, respected, and unconditionally loved. And that's exactly what we had built, one day at a time. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself or someone you love? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story today, and remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion of you, but by the courage you show in honoring your own value.